Welcome to the Open Door Real Estate Podcast, where we will be opening the doors to the minds of those who own, you got it, multiple doors, and all professionals in relation. Today's podcast is brought to you by Barnett Capital, working with equity partners to create wealth through multifamily real estate. Let us do the work while you enjoy the returns. Today's host is the one and only Matt Barnett. Get ready to open your mind, because we are about to do so to those who own multiple doors.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Open Door Real Estate Podcast. Today, we have a very interesting guest, Mr. Damion Lupo. Damion, thank you for being on.
Hey, man, it's good to be here, man. I'm excited to see what we go dive into.
I'm going to read your bio here real quick, and I'm not going to memorize it because it's very long, and I actually had to do this on the last podcast as well. So I'm going to cheat and look at my second screen here. For those watching or listening on any platform, if you do not know who Damion is, Damion has rebuilt his wealth since the first financial crisis of 2008 and can offer advice from the trenches, what to do, what to expect, and how to dig out. Damion has been a professional investor for more than 20 years, starting with the purchase of his first rental house he charged on his visa. That move snowballed into 150 rental houses in less than 5 years. In 2008, he lost the whole $20 million business only to bounce back in less than 5 years. 5 years must be your magic number. Damion is also a best-selling author of a dozen books on personal finance, investment, and retirement strategies. Damion is on a mission to free 1 million people from financial bondage. He hosts the Financial Underdogs podcast, ripping conventional wisdom apart for the Main Street investor looking for truth about money and investing. Not only has he started 50 plus companies, he even founded his own martial art, Yokido. I believe I said that correctly. Damion developed the ultimate investor retirement tool called the EQRP. Apologize if I didn't correct that correctly. His strategy gives individuals total control of their retirement money to invest in real assets like real estate, gold, and crypto. That is a lot of things.
Yeah, man. You know what? I've been busy. I tell you, it's funny because I don't think it matters how much stuff we do. Yeah. If we're a type A or we're vision driven, we tend to think it's not enough because we know we've got potential, and the greatest waste of a life is lost potential that we show up on our death's door and we realize, wow, I didn't really go for it. I don't think we actually regret things we did. I think we regret the things we didn't do. So it might seem like a lot, I think, and then I look at other people that have done so much more and I go, man, I got to get going. I'm like lazy here.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I think I wouldn't even call it entrepreneurial mindset. It's just a mindset, a lot of business mindset. You could do a million things. Like you started 50 plus companies and it's never going to feel enough.
No, and part of that too, I mean, what this boils down to is not that anybody should go and do 50 companies or do tons of stuff. It's that you do things to grow. And one of the mistakes that we've made over the years, and people make it all the time, is thinking that wealth is a number on a checking account or a number of assets or cash flow or something. And it's not. It's the experiences, it's the growth you have by going through the thing. So the more things you do, the reason I keep doing these things is because I'm getting wealthier. It has nothing to do with whether I get paid. It has to do with the actual experience. So that's the key. I think one of the key takeaways that I took away in the last 2 years was a conversation I had with Robert Kiyosaki, and where he made that comment. And I said, man, that is exactly right. And I think I've been looking at things a little differently, a little wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And before we jump straight into real estate, I just want to touch on the fact that you created your own martial art. How did you even happen to do that? I'm sure because you did that, you probably have multiple other black belts, I'm assuming.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because one of the things that Bruce Lee said when he was out, when he was alive, he said he went and trained in different arts, and he took the things that he loved and he threw away the things that didn't fit him. And he had his own style. And that's what happens when you do something long enough. You have your own way of doing it. Especially in martial arts, probably in business, they're very similar. In martial arts, you train for tens of thousands of hours and you end up with multiple black belts in different styles. And something just sort of blossoms out of you. Like you don't realize you're pregnant with your own martial art until you start teaching. And you're like, wow, this is actually different than anybody else's thing. And that's what happened. It was literally just me, the way that I was teaching the Aikido that I had studied. And you know what? It's what fits, and it's the most authentic thing. So I think it's presumptive to say, I'm going to develop a martial art when you've been training for a year or two. It just naturally happens. It's kind of like I bought a house and now I'm going to teach people how to buy real estate. Like I have a big problem with a lot of people that are doing that, because I go, what do you actually know about real estate? You've done it one time.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with anything. If you do it enough, it's just a natural thing that you're speaking from experience, and it becomes who you are. Yeah,
absolutely. And I feel like I could talk about that topic for hours. So I'm going to try my best not to, and jump straight into the real estate side of things now. The CARES Act. And first of all, for those listening and watching, and a disclosure to you, I have very limited to basically no knowledge on this subject that we're covering today. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on and actually learn about it. So I'm basically a listener today. I just want to disclose that. So how does the CARES Act affect real estate syndicators and investors?
Well, so a couple of things. One, most syndicators in general have, if you're raising money from people, if you're doing deals with other people's money, and it's not just their money in their checking account, it tends to be retirement money. What's happened is people have been picking up the wrong type of money, and investors are getting hammered with unnecessary taxes. Basically, people are investing with the self-directed IRAs, and there's a big ticking time bomb. Self-directed IRAs are literally one of the worst ways to invest in real estate when you're doing a syndication. And so first off, just to get that one knocked out, if you're going to invest in a syndication like a multifamily or mini storage or something with your retirement money, you really need to be converting it from an IRA to an EQRP so you can avoid those taxes. So we can dig into that later, or you can get a copy of my book on the QRP and learn about that. The biggest thing that we should all know about right now, because this is actually impacting more people, is the CARES Act. And the CARES Act did some things. This is the big $2 trillion spending spree that Congress did on the 27th of March. And this was in response to coronavirus. And so what Congress did is said, okay, well, we need to find ways to get more money into people's hands so they keep the economy going so we don't end up in a depression. And a couple of things they did with retirement money, they said, okay, if you've got a retirement plan, we're going to allow you to take up to $100,000 out of it right now, no penalty. Normally it's a 10% penalty if you take it out before you're 59 and a half. So they said, okay, you can take out $100,000. Now, if you have an EQRP, you write yourself a check. If you have an IRA, call your custodian. If you have a 401k at work, you've got to call them and see if they're going to allow it, because they have to change their plan a little bit. So that's $100,000. And this money you can either keep this, and then you could go and you could invest it in a syndication, or you could use it to feed yourself, pay for your house payment or whatever. And you can pay that back within 3 years. That's one option. You can pay it back to a retirement account. You can also immediately roll it over into an EQRP. So if you wanted to, like, let's say you have a 401k and you're invested in a bunch of mutual funds and you're like, I really want to invest in real estate. You can actually pull the $100,000 out and then roll it over into an EQRP and then invest it. And now you've got control of it in real estate. Totally different game, never available until now. So that's one piece. And if you don't want to pay it back, you just pay taxes on it over the next 3 years. Yeah. So you can keep the $100,000. Really good way to tap into this resource that might be stuck. And if you're 30, 40, even 50 years old, it may be 10, 20, 30 years before you would normally be able to touch this money. So really powerful thing to be able to tap into that. And that's the first one. So just let that sink, that if you have retirement money, you're probably eligible to tap into up to $100,000 right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So this is just me, probably because of my lack of knowledge, but it's an honest question. I don't want to get off topic, but why do I feel like this topic isn't as big as it is? Why do I feel like there's like a lack of education surrounding this?
It's called Wall Street corruption. The entire system is set up to keep your money trapped your entire life. It's meant for you to be fed on. If you want to understand how much you're being screwed by Wall Street and stocks and bonds and financial advisors, watch The Big Short. I mean, I watched it again last night. I've read it several times. Our system is set up to feed on people's labor and their money for their entire life, from cradle to grave. And unfortunately, we think that financial advisors are helping us. In large part, they're screwing us. And there are some good ones that I've heard of. I've not actually met any of them, but I'm jaded. I mean, I am biased on this because I've seen so many people. We have a lot of people that are moving their money from retirement accounts that are in mutual funds with financial advisors, and they go, "Oh yeah, I go to church with so and so. John, he's my buddy," and And, I think I want to do something different. I want to actually control my money. I want to take responsibility. I'm going to go do real estate. They go to John and they say, hey, I want to do some real estate. And John tells them they're an idiot, that they need to hold it, that real estate's risky, and fights them. And it's because of fees. Because John, the financial advisor, is focusing on John's fees, which is the entire system. It's about fees. Why do you not know about this stuff? Because the system is not set up to give you control of your money. It wants to keep you trapped.
Yeah.
It does not want you to be financially free. It wants you to be financially shackled the rest of your life. That's why you don't know about it.
That's so interesting. It's almost stressing me out.
It should stress you out to the point where you go, okay, well, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
Because this thing, the problem is, if it's not stressing you out enough, you're just going to be stressed out your whole life because you're going to be subject to somebody else's game and their fees. A great example, Matt, I had one of my clients who's a very, very well-known surgeon, and he switched his plan over, his 401k, to an EQRP last year. And he was talking to a buddy of his who also did the same thing. They were doing the math, and they realized that over 30 years, that the actual return after the fees, the last 30 years, from 1990 until 2019, was 2% a year compounded. That's the reality. It's not 8%. It's BS. That's a lie. It's an industry lie that we're being told that we're making 8% and you should hold for the long term. Do you know why they tell you to hold for the long term?
No.
Because they want consistent cash flow to come in from the fees. They don't want you to pull out. They want you to stay there for the next 30, 40 years so they can go golfing and hang out with their family and be relaxed. They're not stressed because they get paid every day based on your blood, sweat, and tears. And so this whole system is totally corrupt. I mean, the banks and paying themselves massive amounts of money and then getting bailed out. Like Jamie Dimon, I don't know if he's right there or he's close, but basically a billionaire. Why? Because he runs Chase. And I mean, that's crazy. That's criminal. How can a guy like that that's getting bailed out by the U.S. government, which means us as taxpayers, how can he end up being worth $1 billion? They're basically stealing from individuals. It's a theft system. It's a corrupt system. So that's my rant, and that's why it's so important that we all understand how to control this stuff. If we abdicate responsibility and say, okay, well, the system is there for me to invest long term, you're just going to be fed on like a bunch of vultures that are just picking you apart in a desert while you rot. I mean, that's unfortunately how the system is set up. So some alternative information is you have options, and the CARES Act gave you one option. It also gave you a different option, which is in a 401k or an EQRP, there's typically a loan availability. So an EQRP always has it. Sometimes 401ks do, sometimes not, where you can borrow $50,000. That was the case when the CARES Act passed. It shifted from 50 to 100,000. So now you can borrow 100,000, no payments in 2020. Don't have to start making payments until 2021, and then you get 5 years to pay it back. And with an EQRP, you get to pick your interest rate. So pretty cool. If you have a loan already, you don't have to make payments in 2020. So basically, it's kind of like a lot of the forbearances with mortgages and car payments. You can literally just say, okay, I want to grab some money to help me, maybe to start a business, maybe to invest, and then I'm going to pay it back, but I don't have to make payments until 2021. So technically, you've got $200,000 potentially you could tap into. Not just you, but if you're syndicating, imagine all the investors that would like to invest with you that have money sitting there, and you can help them and educate them, and they're like, oh, it's not trapped anymore. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. And that was actually going to be my next question, but I'm still going to touch on it because the question was, how can investors tap into that $200,000? But there's a way to do it within 24 hours. And
yeah, so if you have an EQRP, you literally can write yourself a check for both the disbursement for the 100,000 and or the loan up to 100,000. So if you've got investors that are stuck in a self-directed IRA, and I say stuck because you still have a custodian and you don't have the ability to borrow 100,000. So literally you have half the options at best in an IRA. And if you have a 401k, you have very few options because all the options start with the letter M for mutual fund. So basically the question is, do you actually want to control your money? Do you want to actually be free from these pariahs that are sucking you dry? And you have that option. I mean, $200,000 makes a huge difference. You mentioned about when I started with my $6,000 cash advance. People say, how much does it take to start in investing in real estate? I said, it took me negative 6,000. That's how much I had, negative 6,000. I borrowed 6,000. That was my equity. I mean, figure that one out in your brain. It's called other people's money. And so it's not about how much you have. It's how much you demand and are committed to an outcome. If you demand more of yourself, if you demand more of your investments than some financial advisors, 8% for the long term, which is all crap and a lie anyway, then this is probably a much better strategy. It puts all of it in your hands. So 24 hours, 24 minutes, 24 seconds, that's how long it takes for you to fund your deals to get in.
That's insane. I'm just like this. I'm learning a lot, so I apologize because it's all going. I'm just processing everything. Before I move forward, what do you feel like? Because like these big bank guys, right? Do you find yourself having any? You come across any challenges at all? If like, because you're coming in and kind of poking at them and doing things completely different to help everyone else. Do you feel that have they came back at you with anything, or I don't even know where I'm going with this question?
Yeah. What happens is the more people are waking up, the more system is trying to protect itself. Gotcha. The more the attorneys are trying to protect themselves, saying, "Oh, well, you need to be with an attorney. You need to do these things." They don't like to have people like me out there poking and saying, "Hey, you can take control." We have some of it's unbelievable, like Edward Jones, and I throw him out there because my personal experience is terrible with them treating their clients like children. And I've watched this not once or twice, but dozens and dozens of times, pushing people, stalling them out. And I watch it, and it's criminal. Like, that's a criminal organization, in my opinion. And it's because they don't acknowledge the law. They literally will tell people, "No, you can't do that. You can't have control. And no, you're too stupid." And no, and I mean, I've heard this on their recorded lines, and I'm like, unbelievable. You guys are literally so holier than thou. You think it's your money, and that's the way the system works. It thinks it's their money. It's like, yeah, whatever. We're giving you the benefit of being a part of our system and paying you these crumbs. And so, yeah, it does irritate people when you start waking people up that they can actually do stuff themselves, that they don't have to have the Wall Street system, that they don't have to have an attorney to make a decision on what they know is best. Like, people are told, you need a guru, you need to have an attorney to tie your shoes because you're too stupid and you can't read the actual law. Read the CARES law. I think you should have attorneys too, but I don't think you need one for every part of your life. And I think a lot of people get stuck because they're trained to feel inferior. And the reality is, you all have everything you need to get it done if you're committed. That's it.
Yeah, there seems to be a similar mindset here, and I apologize to my listeners and viewers. I'm going to be mentioning this for the third time, but have you read "Outwitting the Devil" by Napoleon Hill?
I have. That was the one that Sharon co-wrote, right?
Yeah. So this is literally, it's not word for word, but the scenario is the same, because the true devil is just walking blindly through life. And then this is a whole different subject, obviously, but just letting the banks control everything blindly and just like, I don't even know where I'm going with that, but I think you know where I'm going with that. I just can't get my words out.
But the system is rigged. And here's the thing: you can either be mad about it or you can do something with it. A lot of times, people just bitch and complain. They say, "Well, this pandemic is X," or "This banking system is Y," and then they don't do anything. Yeah. And so it's like being mad at the rich. Okay, it's the same rules, and I get it. There's insider information and all that kind of stuff. I get some of that stuff. There's also a tax code that we can all be a part of. And so if we just say, okay, well, I'm going to be mad, I'm going to follow AOC and Elizabeth Warren, and I'm going to ask the government to print money and give it to me, you're being a moron, because you can actually go out there and make a ton of money and not pay taxes. When Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were debating back in 2016, and Hillary Clinton said, you know what, he doesn't want to release his tax returns because he doesn't pay taxes. You know what his response was? That makes me smart. Yeah. And everybody is smart that actually reads the tax code, because it's a choice. Taxes are a choice. And there's a lot of people, I hear this idiotic statement that taxes are patriotic. No, they're not. They're literally, the government wants you to do things. The whole tax code, like 99% of the tax code, is written to get you to do things, to produce, to hire people, to build real estate. It's set up so that you don't pay taxes because the government sucks at employing people. It's terrible at building things. Yeah. And so it says, look, we want to incentivize you. So it uses the tax code to shift social behavior. And for somebody to say you should pay more taxes, that just tells me that they think you should be isolated, small, and you should take from the system, which makes sense. What does AOC say? Everything should be free. So that's not the way our system is set up. Mm-hmm. Instead, if you go out there and you actually do real estate investing, you invest in natural resources, solar or oil or whatever, you do all these type of things, you hire people, guess what? You're not paying taxes. And so you can play by those same rules if you're willing to spend the time. But what do we do instead? We play video games, we watch television, we're binging on all this other stuff and being entertained like the Romans were before the Roman Empire collapsed. It's time to get off our butts and go do something.
You blow my mind away. I usually have like so many like good questions, but you're just like pulling the words out here. I feel like you're interviewing me at this, not interviewing me. I feel like you're running this podcast right now, and I'm completely okay with that. Do you find, I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm sorry about this question. Do you find this a controversial topic by chance?
Which thing?
Everything. Do you, how many, because there's a lot of people that don't have the mindset that you and I have, and they probably think we're like, well, they're just they're those rich guys again, blah, 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 right?
Yeah. I mean, I love hearing that. and it's, whenever I hear somebody that's picking on the rich, I'm like, look, I've been poor, I've been rich, I've done it several times, I've lost everything, I've struggled. Now, the thing I think is hard is looking at somebody that's looking down on you, and they started off on third base, and they scored a run. You're like, yeah, but you started off on third base. People get pissed off at President Trump because he had a bunch of money that Fred Trump, his father, gave him to start. I mean, who knows what the number was? 10 million, 100 million, who knows? Who cares? Are you going to let that be an excuse for you? Because I mean, I can tell you that there are more people that are becoming millionaires that started off with nothing than there are that started with something. And it's because it's hard to maintain wealth. It typically is gone in 3 generations. There's something about creating it and earning it. And I wouldn't want to be like my grandmother recently passed away, and I think everybody in my family had an inheritance. I was glad I didn't get a dime. I don't want anybody's money. Because to me, it turns me into some type of lazy slob. I don't want it. It's not, and a lot of people are waiting for the lottery ticket, and what you're doing is you're waiting for a unicorn, because even if you get it, you're screwed. The reason that unicorns and lottery tickets are mythical events, and we go, no, lottery is real. No, it's not. Because when you win a lottery event, that money's going right through you, because you have not become rich. Your context won't hold the money. It's why it goes right through and people go bankrupt. So you shouldn't be wishing for freebies. You should be wishing to be better. How do you get better? You do something. You don't say, I just want to be better. You go out there and bust your ass, and you do it for years. And people go, yeah, but that's work. And I'm like, oh, it's a 4-letter word. Oh, damn. You know what? That's what it takes. And so rich people, I mean, we're beating up rich people. I mean, this whole trend towards the rich are bad. I'm like, money doesn't do anything except accelerate what you already are.
Yeah.
So if you're a jerk, you're going to be a big jerk. I mean, I know what that was like, because I was a big jerk back in the 2000s. And it was because I was a hedonist. I was focused on myself. And when you shift, what I find is that most of my rich friends are the kindest people, and the money has accelerated their generosity. And the people that don't have any money, I see them being scroungy, and they're negative, and I'm like, I need like bug spray to spray on you. It's terrible. Yeah. And so we need to ask ourselves, what's the real problem? And usually it's looking back at us in the mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. I do apologize that we went off topic here, but I mean, this mindset, it starts there before you even worry about the money. It's a mindset first. The real estate, the money doesn't matter. Exactly. It literally is the wrong thing to focus on. People say, well, I need to figure out what's the tool. How do I make money? And I'm like, fix you. The personal development trumps everything. And unfortunately, a lot of people say, well, personal development or training, whether it's Napoleon Hill or Tony Robbins or Landmark, they say, nah, that's just woo. And what I need to know is how to buy a house or flip a property or buy an apartment. And I shake my head. I'm like, you don't get it. And they're too arrogant. And they're Mark Twain said this. He said, it's not what you know. It's what you're sure that you know. It's not what you don't know. It's what you know that just ain't so. And people think they know. I'm like, you don't know. But why do you think you know? Because your ego's driving the damn car. And so you insist on being right, and then you defend your stuff instead of saying, I just don't know. Yeah. So, and then the next question is, how could I figure out what I don't know? And this is the shift, because the questions we ask ourselves and other people, it really bugs me. And people go, I don't know. And then I go, so you're done. Your brain is shut down at this point. If you actually cared enough about yourself, if you didn't want to be a victim, this is the problem. Our society is set up as victims and people that are blaming, and they're justifying their lives instead of being responsible. You know, it's cool being around responsible people. They don't have reasons.
for why things didn't happen. They have lessons that they're going to use to go make things happen. Huge difference. So just ask yourself, do you have reasons or do you have lessons? I never said that before. And that's exactly the case for A and B population. Do you have reasons or lessons?
Yeah, that's really good. I'm going to clip that, by the way. I'm gonna get back on topic here. I'm sorry. We're getting motivational, which is not hard to do when you have that mindset. But back we were talking about the 200,000. Investors can take it out in 24 hours or whatnot. What about everyday W-2 employees? What provision is there for them to, I guess, get access to that money?
So this is one of the downsides of being an employee. You might be able to get access to this money. It depends on your employer. It's like, if you don't have control of your stuff, you're just at the whim of everybody else. If you don't have control of your money, your financial advisor, I love this word, advisor, your financial salesperson that's sucking your, bloodless. The CARES Act allowed W-2 employees that have 401ks to borrow and disperse the 100,000 in each case if their plan allows it. So it's really about going to the plan administrator and saying, "Hey, can I do this?" I mean, it's kind of unfortunate because Congress passed this law and you still have companies that are saying, "No, we can't be bothered. We're not going to allow this." And some of them are justifying it by saying, "We haven't fired anybody." Well, okay, so what if my spouse lost her job and we need the money, but you're telling me that no, I can't access my money because I still have a job? Well, we may be losing our house or something.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important for people, if they need it, to reach out to their administrators and say, "Hey, I need this. I need you to change the plan if it's not changed." But the law allows us now to take up to 200,000 as a W-2. It doesn't really matter. If you've got a 401k, those provisions are in place.
That's interesting. So then how do you think the whole CARES Act thing is going to affect the economy? And I would say the next few months, but I mean, it could be, next year.
Well, it's kind of like quantitative easing, the QE that was started years ago after the meltdown in 2008. The CARES Act was the Act One. So if you think about a play, it's like a Shakespearean disaster that's playing out. This is not the only $2 trillion that's going to be printed. I mean, what happened 2 weeks later? There was a follow-up $480 billion. So now we're almost at $3 trillion that was added to the Fed's the balance sheet of $4 trillion, almost doubling it in 60 days. I mean, you just think about that, going from $4 trillion to close to $7 trillion, and we're going to move beyond that. The printing that's going to go on because of this shutdown is going to be mind-boggling. And one of the things that's happened over the last decade is we haven't really felt the effect of inflation because, well, globalization is very deflationary. So printing a bunch of money is very inflationary. The offset was deflationary. So we said, "Oh, everything is good. Look, all the prices are the same." The consumers and the savers got screwed because if the government and the Federal Reserve was not printing like they were, all the prices would have dropped. Everybody would have been better off, except the elitists, the people that have all these assets. They're screwing everybody because of the printing of money. So what's going to happen going forward? I think globalization is going to shift and it's going to reduce because we're into these trade wars. We're going to have tariffs, all this stuff. And so the more we just internalize inside borders and the more we make here, prices are going to go up. So how do you hedge against that? Make sure you have some assets that are not just mutual funds. Make sure you've got gold and silver physically, not GLD or SLV that you might have because your advisor says buy it. They tell you to buy that crap because they get fees off of it. So really rethinking about your assets and making sure that if things are hyper deflationary or inflationary, what is your current life? How's it going to be impacted? And for most of us, we're like, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, the stock market long term is going to be good." That's what we've been told. So everything's going to be fine. No, it's not. When your dollars are crushed and obliterated, I mean, the dollar has lost 97, 98% since the Federal Reserve came into play in 1913. That's not going to stop. In fact, it's going to get worse. So everybody that's trying to save their way into wealth or mutual funds or whatever, listen to Harry Dent. I mean, you think that if I just invest for the long term, Matt, do you realize that in 1929, when the stock market crashed, it took 25 years for it to break even?
It's crazy. I did not know that.
No, most people say, "Oh yeah, I'm investing for the long term." I'm like, you might be breaking even long term, maybe, but what happens if you're 50 and you need to pull money out of the stock market for your retirement? And we're in the middle of a crash, a dip. Very likely, very possible. I don't think a bear market's going to last 6 months. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a ton of printing, and that printing is going to obliterate savers. It's going to obliterate the bond market. It's going to pop the stock market. We are in for some rough times, and people that say everything is good because the stock market's stabilizing. No, it's not. That's called manipulation. It's the president's working team. It's the plunge protection team. This is what they do. They go in there and they push money into markets. And the Federal Reserve has said, we're going to buy equities if needed. We'll do anything we need. It's QE infinity, quantitative easing forever for anything. That is incredibly dangerous, but that is their plan because they think the modern monetary theory is we can print and everything is fine. You can't print. That's like saying, okay, we're just going to turn off gravity, or we can just create labor out of thin air. It's not real. Gravity still exists whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So you keep mentioning EQRP, which is you created it and it's made to benefit or help investors. What is it? And how can it benefit them?
So the EQRP is an enhanced qualified retirement plan. It's a unique vehicle that allows people to control their retirement money. And this is whether you are an individual, whether you have an online business, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're a real estate investor and you're managing properties. If you have employees, like a lot of people, I get irritated at some of these morons that are out there. I've seen some of these blog posts and they go, oh, this is the same as this other thing. And I go, no, it's not. So there's things like self-directed IRAs and solo 401ks. They're limited and restricted. An EQRP is anybody is eligible for it, whether you have employees, whether you are an employee, and it basically gives you bottom line control of your money. You can invest how you want, and you don't get taxed if you do real estate like you do with an IRA. It is the Rolls Royce of retirement accounts, and why again don't we know about it? Because fees. We charge to set it up. And we charge a flat fee to have it to keep it in compliance each year. We do not harvest people and take 2% of their money for looking at their money and babysitting it. We don't charge them for writing a check. We don't charge them for doing a deal. We don't charge them for receiving a check. This is all the stuff that IRAs and those type of vehicles do, and it's really screwy. And then bottom line, as you're growing, this thing adapts with you. It allows you to hire people part-time, full-time. So it's ultimately a way for you to control your money in your retirement account. And what's a retirement account? A qualified retirement account is something that gives you tax sheltering, tax benefits for money that's long-term money. That's all a qualified plan is. It's just structured so that you don't have to pay taxes. Now you can grow things. And with a Roth, you can pay no taxes forever. Back to Hillary Clinton saying, you don't pay taxes. Well, dodo bird, if you actually understood the freaking tax code instead of being an attorney and attacking the rich, you would understand that you could also pay no taxes. But she's too busy attacking because she's playing to popularism. This idea that we need to tear down the rich. That's a great idea. So who's going to employ anybody? And so if you think about it, there are strategies. You literally can pay no taxes with a Roth EQRP. No taxes for your life. No taxes. It's
incredible.
That's the strategy. There are strategies there. The bottom line is the rich don't really pay taxes.
No, I know that. Look at Bezos.
Yeah, well, anybody that has money, it's almost a badge of honor when people say, "Well, I pay 14%." Like somebody says that, I'm like, "Why are you paying taxes? Are you lazy? Because sometimes they say, well, I'm just like Mitt Romney. I remember his effective tax rate was like 14, and Barack Obama was 30 or 28 or something, and it's because one's an employee and one's an investor, and there's different tax brackets, there's different taxable events, and so the question is, which one do you want to choose to pay? And I like to pay zero. What that does is it tells me that I'm actually doing things that benefit the economy. If I'm paying 35% taxes, give you an example. You flip a house, you're likely to pay 55 to 65% taxes because it's all your ordinary income, federal, state, and self-employment. You go and buy an apartment or a house to rent out, you're going to pay zero taxes. What does the government want you to do? They want you to create housing. They don't want you to be a speculator. But what does the HGTV channel say? Go be a speculator.
Yeah.
That's great for the government. They get paid a lot of taxes, but you're taking on all the risk and you get maybe a third of the profit. That's stupid.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a lot of like the EQRP, and you mentioned a lot of benefits, but and differences so far, but digging a little bit deeper, how much more different is it from a self-directed IRA? I know you mentioned a few key things already, but
well, so key things, you have control of your money. With self-directed IRA, you don't have control. You have a custodian that's in the middle of you and your money. If you invest in a real estate, I'll give you an example, and this is hardcore example. You invest $50,000 out of your IRA into a syndication. Okay, you invest in an apartment, or you invest in a house that you're gonna buy and then you're gonna sell. Like a syndication, typically you're buying it and then you sell it 5 years later. That kind of thing. So if you do that with an IRA and your 50,000 turns into 100,000, you are going to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 in Youve tax. It's this surprise mystery tax that nobody's ever heard of until they get a bill. And it's when you have leveraged real estate, IRAs are subject to it. It's up to 37% tax on most of most of your profit. So $12,000. You use an EQRP instead. You know how much you pay in tax? 0. So it's exempt from it. So if that was the only thing that was the difference, it is plenty. I mean,
huge difference.
Why would you want to give away $12,000? That's on 50,000. What if you do it with 250? I've had people that came in that had $700,000 in syndications. I remember one a couple of months ago. Guy had $700,000 in syndications. Was going to make about $700,000 over the next 5 years, and we were doing the math, and we're like, okay, so $700,000, you're going to pay about $150,000 in Youve tax. He transferred his money from his IRA. He transferred the assets. So this is another thing, Matt, that you can transfer assets. If you're already invested, you're like, oh, damn, I'm stuck. It's called an in-kind rollover. You roll over the asset from the IRA into the EQRP, and now you're not paying that tax. So instead of losing $150,000, he gets to keep all his profit. Major difference. So that's just a couple of them. IRAs, you can't borrow money out of them. With the EQRP, you can borrow the 100,000 right now. So that's flexibility. You've got protections in an EQRP that you don't have with an IRA for liability. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and those are the big ones. And if those aren't enough, you need to rewind and listen to this again because you just missed the whole point.
Yeah. So for those, let's say someone's listening to this and they have their assets and their money and everything, and just say, and their self-directed IRA, whatever, and they want to switch to EQRP. Where do they go? How do they do it?
They go to EQRP.co, the EQRP company, and literally we'll walk them through. If you go there, there's a place you can get a copy of the QRP book. I wrote the QRP book many years ago, and it's updated each year. And so you can get a free copy of it. In fact, make it simpler. Just go to QRPbook.com and get yourself a free copy of the book. And it'll also give you a report on the QRP, the qualified retirement plans. So you understand this stuff. It'll give you a sense of, okay, I've been lied to. I did the best I could with the information I had, and now I'm going to do something better. That's where everybody should start. If you've got an IRA, unless the reason people have IRAs is it's typically a default. You leave a job and they say, okay, if you want to roll it over to an IRA. They don't say EQRP because honestly, they don't even know about it. Yeah. They just go, okay, go to the IRA. Why do they go to IRAs? Because it's a $10 trillion industry.
Yeah.
And so that's a default. But you don't want to, your next decade should not be by default. It should be by design. I mean, I did a program on this, a decade by design, on purpose, because you can create anything. You want to be financially free? I guarantee you I can make that happen with you in 5 years. 10 years is easy. But most of us are doing default stuff, and we're just listening to morons giving us information. That makes two morons in the conversation. So we have to start thinking differently and then investing differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this topic, by the way. I'm excited to edit this later because I'm just going to be like rewinding it and listening to different parts of it like 5 times. This part of the podcast, I need to change my wording because it was supposed to be a rapid fire question thing. It just turned into like questions to get personal answers out of you, but they're not personal questions. So for example, what superpower is going to make you thrive in the coming months?
My ability to call BS. It's and the willingness to call it. So I see a lot of people they're anxious to do some type of thing. They want to invest in the stock market because they think it's hit a bottom, and they're wrong. It has not hit a bottom. I would bet my net worth on that. They're anxious to recover whatever losses they have so far. And my superpower is the ability to say, okay, it's questions. I ask questions and people go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I'm like, yeah, that's a scam. That's a Ponzi. That's a scam. All these things you're going to get ripped off. The ultimate superpower is patience and being willing to not do most things. And that's why Warren Buffett, other than his quarterly earnings report that just came out and he lost $50 billion, but typically he just is happy to sit idle. I mean, he's sitting on a ton. I think it's more north of 100 billion in cash. And so being willing to be patient and then saying no to almost everything is a really hard thing to do because we naturally want to get things going. We go, my money can't sit idle. I got to do something. I lost $20 million in 2007 and 8 because after I'd made millions in 04 and 05, I wasn't willing to go on vacation and just chill. I had to go back in and get stimulated. And our need to get stimulated is what gets us into trouble. If we can actually learn the art of stillness, we can get wealthy beyond imagine.
Absolutely. I love that. And you're a very, very interesting person. So I'm excited to ask this question. This is the only question I've asked on every single show so far. What 3 people, dead or alive, would you like to sit down and have dinner with?
Oh, goodness. The 3 people that I'd like to have dinner with. Golly. Some of the people, I don't know if I would survive dinner. Like, you imagine having dinner with Genghis Khan, you'd probably end up dead. That'd be kind of brutal. I think it'd be very powerful to be in the presence of Mother Teresa, to have that stillness, and just feel what it's like to her love and her compassion. I'm not even a fraction of that. And I would love to be in that presence. People there's a whole lot of people, whether it's Joan of Arc or whether it's people that were cast, they're ostracized and they were told they were wrong. And like, I would love to have dinner with Buckminster Fuller, way ahead of his time, smarter than Einstein. Einstein said, this is the smartest guy of the 20th century. Sitting down and having dinner with him, I wouldn't understand anything. I can get through 3 pages of most of his books, and that's it, and barely 3 pages. So there's something about being around people that you start absorbing them. And so if you think, well, I don't know what to do, look at who you're around. Those 5 people that influence you, that you're absorbing, your question is great. So the question is, okay, who's around me? Who is out there that's alive right now that we could actually find a way to serve? And those people are ultimately going to want to serve us. There's a circulation that we can't help it. It's called reciprocity. And so finding service to those people, they don't have to be dead. I mean, there's some amazing people. Another one, I would actually just love to go back in time and have any conversation with my grandparents and my grandfathers, great grandfathers, those people, because one of the things we have, all of us have our DNA is stamped with trauma and different experiences that people have from the Depression. Why do people hoard things in 2020? A lot of it is this genetic stamping from the Depression, where we kept everything. And so that trauma embedded itself into our DNA and our cellular structure, and it carried forward as people were, they had offspring. And so we're like, why are we hoarding? It's because that stuff was so intense. So I would love to be able to have conversations and understand where I came from, because I don't think most of us have a clue. And we sure as heck haven't had a conversation with our great-great-grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how I asked you a question about the 3 people that you'd want to have dinner with, and I learned something from it. Very basic question. Best piece of advice you've ever received? It's pretty broad, so.
Fail faster.
Fail faster. Wow, that's really good.
Our system, and that nobody can disagree with it. Our entire system is set to be perfect. Get straight A's, get good grades, get a good job, play by the rules, and nothing changes. Like we don't grow, we don't learn, we don't contribute if we're not willing to fall on our face. And the biggest mistake I see people making is that they're afraid of judgment, so they don't act. And I go, what is like a Tyrannosaurus Rex going to jump out of the weeds and eat you if you do that thing and you get it wrong? And then people say, well, I go, how did you do in school? Like, it's B's and A's or whatever. And I go, that's the problem. In the real world, there are no B's and A's unless you work for the government. And then you just work not to make a mistake. And that's typical. Our system is setting itself up to have bureaucrats and people that don't make mistakes. But in the real world, if you make 50% right, you're a billionaire. In the school system, you make 50% right, means you got 50% wrong. They kick you out. They tell you you're an idiot. They give you a dunce cap. So what's reality? Anybody that's doing great, that's impacting people, doesn't matter whether it's business or yoga or anything, they're out there. I mean, you ever been to a yoga class, and if you do it the first time, you fall on your head. Like it just happens. And anybody that's brilliant and amazing, they fell. We all fall. Riding a bike, most people have done that. You fall when you start, and then you keep doing it, and you keep bleeding, and then eventually you ride. Yeah. And that's, even then, I still ride a mountain bike, and every once in a while I fly over my handlebars. I'm 42 years old, and I still beat myself up, and it's just part of life. Yeah. And so embracing that instead of avoiding it is how we actually experience life, and we don't get to the end with regret. We get to the end with, oh, damn, that was amazing. Yeah.
And it's funny you mention that. So just from a business aspect, I always say you never lose, you learn, and then you remove the L and you earn. So I like it, right? And then just from a mindset perspective, you mentioned the A, B, C, and D student thing. And I get I would gladly admit and argue with this any day, obviously to an extent, that if you just look a lot of times, and I've read this, I don't remember where, so it's not mine, A and B students usually end up working for C and D students.
They do, because it's hard. It is hard and it's painful to employ people to do business. And when you're a C student, you're used to having just making mistakes. Like you're like, okay, well, A's and B's aren't part of my world. I make a lot of things wrong. I do a lot of things wrong. When you're an A and a B student, it's like it's too paralyzing to go out there and do things because you're going to get them wrong. And so you're like, nope, can't do that. So you do work for C students or the government. I mean, A students work for C students and B students typically work for the government. I mean, that's why we have some people that are great in government. I haven't really met any of them, but I presume that they're out there. Most people, they're looking for something safe and secure because they're falling into a reptilian version of Maslow's hierarchy where it's shelter, food, and sex, and basically a job with the government gives them at least a couple of those.
And don't get me wrong, I'd rather have a doctor get A's than D's, by the way.
and the A students typically are either they're working for C students or they are high paying individuals, professionals, attorneys, doctors, and they end up getting taxed to death, and most of them get burned out. I mean, it's unfortunate, but being an A student is not. I don't think it's a worthy goal. I think it's a dangerous goal, and it's not always the case, but it's very dangerous if you're focused on perfection because you're never going to get there. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't seek, we shouldn't drive and grind. It just means that it's not realistic because we're not really focused on failing, and that's the key. It's the key to growth. It's the key to wealth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So this part of the podcast, I usually ask for a book recommendation, which I do not need to do because you've wrote over a dozen or around a dozen. Tell us about those books, where that people can find them, etc.
So I mentioned the QRP book, and that's great for retirement accounts. I think that probably the most relevant book for everybody right now is a book I wrote in 2012 after I'd lost the 20 million, spent a number of years literally with coaches and therapists figuring out what the heck had just happened and who I was. It's called Reinvented Life. And it's perfect right now because of the experience we're having. Most people listening, you guys listening right now, there's some type of reinvention that you or your family or your neighbors are going through. The question is, what the heck is the blueprint? Like, how do you process that? And in retrospect, Reinvented Life was written for me from 10 years. I wish I'd had it 10 years earlier because it would have given me a playbook instead of just stumbling around and tripping on my own shoes. So Reinvented Life could potentially save your life because it'll give you a way to look at things. One, you'll realize you're not alone. I know we hear this a lot right now. We're in this together, but sometimes it feels like our problems and the struggle and the pain it's like nobody could possibly be going through this. And what you'll realize in Reinvented Life is the pain that you're going through, it's probably in that book. And the structures and the strategies and the questions to move you through it are also in there. So it's not just a woo book. It's not like, hey, I just had this dream and I put it into a book. Those are cool too. Yeah. And it's not just let me tell you what to do. It's like, okay, I went through this stuff and let me give you some ideas. And ultimately, Matt, the questions that are in there are the most important things. Because I am not your guru. Tony Robbins has a documentary. I think it's called I Am Not Your Guru. The book, a book or a video or a person is not your answer. You have the answers. My job is to ask questions. And so that's what Chris and I did when we wrote this book. We had some really intense questions because I think if you're willing to tell the truth, what is true, and you will write it down, especially about your money and your time. Those two things tell me everything about somebody. What are you doing with your time? Like, what are you and I doing on this Sunday morning? We're helping other people. Yeah. We're engaging, and what are most people doing? Probably not that. Yeah. And then what are we doing with our money? Like I remember I bought a house from some people, and it was like this. It was the second house I bought as an investment property. And I met these people at this house, and they wanted to move into another house that I had. So we basically swapped houses. It was a bigger house. And I remember them not having a whole lot of money. They said, well, we can give you this house that we have and trade it in the equity for the new house. And I said, okay, guess that works. And then they ended up losing the other house from me. And it was fascinating to me. And the reason I bring this up is because I was looking around their current house, the smaller house, and they had all these DVDs and all this stuff. And I was like, you guys make, $100,000 a year. You're hardworking, nice people, but your money skills are terrible. You're basically paying off your kids to get them to stop crying. And you guys can't help but clicking the buy now button. And so looking at your money, the whole point of Reinvented Life is to ask better questions and to figure out the truth. What are you doing? And if you want a different life 10 years from now, we have to start with what you're doing now, because your trajectory is more of the same. Just bottom line, it's more of the same. And unless you start using a trim tab, which is a boat term, you trim tab a little 1% or 2%, and your trajectory goes way differently into a different direction. So that book will open up you to the truth, whatever it is for you. And it's going to be very personal.
Yeah. And where can people buy that book at?
Amazon is our favorite book place.
Easy enough.
They just, you go there and get a copy of it, and it's on Kindle or Audible. And so however you learn, it's available for you. Yeah,
that's awesome. And what was my next question? So you wrote, it's a dozen books, right?
Yeah, I think we're past a dozen. Yeah, it's kind of like starting a bunch of businesses. I don't even know it's over 50. It just gets to a point where either you've written one or you just start, it's like a dozen plus. And you lose track of them because I'm too busy writing them to really pay attention to it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that I get what I've learned into books so people can leverage off of that and I contribute to other people. And so I don't make the same dumb mistakes again. I mean, hell, most of the books I write so that I learn from myself because I don't want to do the same dumb thing twice.
And it's getting kind of towards the end of the podcast. Where can people find you? Continue off of my podcast and everything. Connect with you, learn from you, and continue to educate themselves. Obviously, even outside of the books, like where can they go? Who do they talk to?
Best place to visit is DamionLupo.com. You're gonna see more of me than you ever want to experience. If you want to listen to hundreds of hours of podcasts, you can listen to Financial Underdogs, which everything links. That's my podcast. All of this links to Damion Lupo, and I think everybody should have a place where we own, like on the internet. We should all have that. It's just kind of a random piece of advice because we want to be able to drive the story of who we are and own it. Like you don't necessarily own your story on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram because it's somebody else's platform. When you have your own website, you get to architect it any way you want. And you can share with the world who you are and what you're about, not how some algorithm says you are. And I think that's a really dangerous thing. I have friends that have had their stuff, they've had millions of views and all sorts of people. And then these platforms decide, we're just shutting it down. No reason. Well, that's pretty dangerous to build your entire life on somebody else's platform and have it go away. So just a random piece of advice, make sure you have a website, your presence and who you are, and then you can dictate the conversation.
Yeah, that's really good. I have thought about that. And actually, perfect example. Do you remember Vine? I know it was more of a kids platform, completely gone, like vanished. And someone had millions and millions of followers, and next day you're done. That's it. And then what do you do now?
It's called reinventing your life.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a thing on here. It says text EQRP to 72,000.
Yeah, so if you want a quick copy, you're listening to this on your phone, which you probably are right now, grab your phone and just text the word EQRP to 72,000 and you'll get a digital copy of the report on the QRP. So if you're like, well, all that stuff these guys were talking about with getting money out of my retirement account and these controlling it, man, that is the place to go to get quick access information, actionable information. And you can also share it with people. Like you can take that report and literally text it to somebody else and say, hey, check this out, read this. Super easy. Just text EQRP to 72,000 and it'll show up in a matter of like 30 seconds.
Awesome. I love it. Damion, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and your Sunday. Obviously we're quarantined, so I guess, we have time, but I appreciate you being on the podcast. Is there anything you would like to close out on or?
Yeah, the one thing you just said is really important. We all have the same 168 hours in a week. It's the great equalizer. The difference is what we actually do with it. Do we spend it? Do we invest it? Do we squander it? And ultimately, are we willing to go out there and take those gifts that are wrapped up? They're called mistakes. They're wrapped up in, it's a gift wrapped up in pain from the universe, from God. Are we going to take that stuff and run with it, or are we going to run away from it? And so your next 168 hours are up to you. Nobody can take that away from you. You can only give it away or invest it, but it's really a choice. It's the power to choose. By the way, that's one of the best books ever, Your Greatest Power by J. Martin Coe. And ultimately, it's about choice. So you guys have a choice to make. What are you going to do with the next 24 and 168? Your time. We're all equalized by it. So you choose, and I wish you well, and Godspeed to everybody listening.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Open Door Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by Barnett Capital, where every Monday we will be opening the doors to the minds of those who own multiple doors. You can find all past and future podcasts at barnettcapitalco.com/podcast or facebook.com/Barnett Capital Co. Thanks for listening.